So this technique in Ed Parker's Kenpo is called Glancing Salute, and it's called that because of our opponent's push, which is with his right arm to our right shoulder. His push is going to glance off as we execute our first move. We're going to trap his right wrist with our right forearm, and we're going to step forward and attack his right elbow with our left forearm strike, which will look just like a left inward block. In Kenpo, it is important to understand that power is important, but it is not the first consideration when we choose which strike to use next. Provided a strike has sufficient power to do the job, a more primary consideration in Kenpo is highest probability of success. In other words, which strike is the hardest for our opponent to block, and which target is the hardest for our opponent to protect. The answer to those two questions give us the greatest chance of outspeeding our opponent. So as we continue with this self-defense technique, we are now going to use a check. This is an equally important concept in Kenpo because it is preventing the opponent from striking us back at the same time. That is what we call checking in Kenpo. We should notice the various ways in which this happens in our self-defense techniques, but I will point them out as we continue. So we are now in a left reverse bow stance while we're executing the break against our opponent's right arm, breaking his elbow. Next, we will check our opponent's right arm down as we then pivot to a left forward bow stance, and we're going to execute a right heel palm to our opponent's chin, because this strike is virtually impossible for him to prevent us from executing. So we use what we refer to as a path of least resistance in order to maximize our chances of succeeding without getting blocked. As you continue to watch this technique, you will notice that as Kenpo black belts, we spent many years developing many different strikes, all of which start from different positions. And we do that by practicing pre-designed techniques that show us the fastest and most effective strike for that specific situation, and that gives us an advantage in situations and various fighting postures and stances that would be unfamiliar to most people. In Kenpo, we learn to strike from positions that most people would not usually consider, as they might feel that they are too close for striking, or they instinctively try to wrestle because of how close they now are, and they don't feel that they got a good shot. They feel jammed up. So as we continue with our self-defense technique, we are now going to convert that right heel palm to our opponent's jaw into a grab behind his neck, since we're already on his face and don't have to go far to do this. When we now anchor our right elbow, which means we pull it downward, we are able to pull our opponent down, keeping his left arm in check so that way he cannot hit us. And at the same time, we're going to again use a path of least resistance and use our right knee to strike our opponent in the stomach or the groin as we step our right leg then forward into a right neutral bow stance. Notice how difficult it would be for our opponent to even notice that knee strike, right? Let alone try to block it. Now, the physical reaction of us striking our opponent to the stomach or the groin with our right knee is that he is probably going to be moved back by his hips. His hips will move back and away from us from the pain and the impact of the right knee strike, but his upper body is not. When somebody gets hit in the stomach or the groin, they bend forward. They don't bend backwards, right? So notice how we're going to take advantage of the fact that our opponent is now bending forward, and we're going to execute a right inward elbow strike to his head. This makes the strike more forceful as he is coming right into that. In Kenpo, we refer to this as borrowing force. Our strike is more forceful by striking a target that comes right towards our natural weapon. So in Kenpo, our job is always not to let the opponent turn this into a wrestling match. And we're doing that by using his own reactions against him. But we are also achieving this by selecting strikes that work very well in these unique close range positions. So in part, we are doing this by using many strikes that simply do not require depth to travel through. So we look for strikes which travel through height and width, because they cannot be easily blocked just by getting closer or jamming us up. And practicing pre-designed self-defense techniques in Kenpo helps us to anticipate our opponent's reactions, which we will then take advantage of. So here we are at the end of the base technique, with our left hand checking our opponent's right arm and our right inward elbow striking to our opponent's head. For lower belts who practice this as an orange belt technique, this will now be followed with a cover out, which is a safe way of leaving our opponent without him being able to strike us back as we are departing.